Terrorism remains a persistent threat and in some ways is positioned to increase in 2019. The conflicts in Iraq and Syria have generated a large pool of skilled and battle-hardened fighters who remain dispersed throughout the region. While ISIS is nearing territorial defeat in Iraq and Syria, the group has returned to its guerrilla warfare roots while continuing to plot attacks and direct its supporters worldwide. ISIS is intent on resurging and still commands thousands of fighters in Iraq and Syria.
So, Brett, basically, terrorists like to continue to make a name for themselves no matter where they are. So that while certainly you could point to a significant success of taking away ISIS's territory, they still want to make a mark.
Yes, and this is the difference between the intelligence chiefs and the head of Intel talking to Congress about threats, laying out some more specific details, and what the president does on Twitter when he kind of shorthands a lot of things a lot of times. You get a much different sense from these Intel heads about, one, ISIS and the strength. Yes, it has diminished in size. The territory is minuscule to what ISIS did cover in Iraq and Syria before.
Definitely.
But it's still a lethal threat. And you see the same with Russia and how much it's interfering and plans to, China and Iran, that it is not in the process of making a nuclear weapon, but still is a threat, especially with terrorism throughout the region.
During that hearing, the Washington Post had this report that said that Russia had even approached North Korea about building a nuclear reactor there for them. Of course, Russia sort of involves throughout the world, and the president certainly has a full plate in February, not just on domestic policy. Of course, we've got the shutdown negotiations that are underway. We have a presidential State of the Union where he supposedly will lay out his vision for the next year or two. That's followed by a budget release, and then you have a North Korea summit at the end of the month. You have Venezuela. I mean, there's a lot to deal with in this short month of February.
Yeah, let alone if Mueller comes out in some form in the coming weeks. I think the North Korea part was most stark for me, listening to these Intel heads talk about how they really believe that North Korea believes that it's existential, it's essential that that they have nuclear weapons and that nuclear capability to deal with what they consider the existential threat of their foes. That is a much different picture than the optimistic tone you hear from President Trump ahead of this summit, second summit with Kim Jong-un. I do think that the president and the administration would say, hey, listen, he's not firing rockets over Japan.
True.
He's not testing nuclear weapons. And this is the assessment of where they're going or what they're doing, but maybe I can change that.
What do you hear about the discussions on the negotiations for border security money? We're going to have a Democratic member of Congress on later in the show to talk about how that's going, and she's at the table for the negotiations. The president put it at less than 50% chance, but do you get any other sense in Washington?
Well, just talking to people, Democrats and Republicans, they don't think the money is the problem. It is the implementation and what you call it. And we are where we are on the semantics of the wall or the barrier or whatever. I think you're getting a coalition of Democrats who are stepping forward saying they're ready to do something significant on border security. They've already voted, as we've talked about many times, for much more than what they're being asked for now. But now it's about Trump and giving President Trump a victory. They're not willing to do that, and they have to figure out some negotiation. He's not done. I mean, Nancy Pelosi clearly won the first battle, Dana, but the war is not over when it comes to border security.
And just a last quick question for you. The idea of a possible bigger immigration deal, where do you put the odds of that?
I think less than 50-50. I don't think this big, broad deal is going to happen. There could be some smaller deal that deals with some elements of it, but as far as like a full-on DACA, exemption tied to some wall, I just don't see it. I just don't hear it.
Well, we have plenty to talk about in February, as that month is just around the corner. Brett Baier, thank you.
All right, Dana, see you.